we have filmmakers representing both the South Asia competition and world cinema here. And we have a big panel. What I'll be doing is to ask kind of questions that are could be responded to by a group of people rather than specific individual questions. And considering there's a diversity in the group, I think I'll organize this group into various kinds of clusters when I ask questions. So I've thought of, for one, there is the competition and the world cinema. That's one group. There's also a set of debut filmmakers that cut across the world cinema and South Asia competition, and so on. So I will use these kind of different kind of clusters to kind of ask questions. So about 30 minutes or so, we'll have a conversation, and at some point we'll open up to the audience and so on. The main purpose, as Deepthi or somebody might have told you, is to also archive a conversation for the future, so that these kind of the background of your filmmaking practice and so on remain for the press or other people to pick up as we go along. The attendees today are from the South Asia competition section. There is Diwa Shah, the director of Bahadur. There's Sumanth Bhat, the director of Mithya. There's Fazil Razak, the director of Thadavu, The Sentence. There is Nina Ognjanović, where the road leads. That's from the world cinema category. There's Anaïs, Tellenne, the dreamer. And there is Sophie, Letourneur, from the Voyages in Italy. There's the group of filmmakers that we have today. Among these, like I said, most of the filmmakers are younger, starting off either first time or second time filmmakers, except Sophie, who's a seasoned filmmaker who has a filmography behind her. So we'll talk about that in a minute. First, what I want to actually open this conversation up is to actually talk to the debut filmmakers, cutting across these categories, and to ask about this. I think Kanu, please join us here. So we're joined by Kanu Behl, director of Agra, which is also part of the South Asia competition section. Yeah, Kanu is a second-time filmmaker, which is a singular category, I think, here. So two people who represent themselves and the others a group. So first I'll ask the debut filmmakers to actually talk about, and mainly what we need to talk about mostly is the kind of process and the kind of practices of filmmaking and distribution and the way we get to audiences and so on and so forth, so that this also becomes some kind of a guide and a conversation starting point for newer filmmakers and so on, right? That's the main kind of issues that we will actually deal with. So I want to actually start with the debut filmmakers and ask, how did you get here? Like what was the route that you took to actually make the first film? And this is a question that both Kanu and Sophie can also answer, because there was at one point of time they were also debut filmmakers, right? So what was the route that you all took to actually get to this point of, I mean, some of you showing for the first time, world premiere here at MAMI, some of you having had some run at the film festivals and then showing in India for the first time or South Asia in the first time. So why don't I start with Sumanth, and then we can actually, so Sumanth, Fazil, Diwa, and then Nina and Anaïs. Then I'll come to Kanu and Sophie after that.
Yeah, so if you could just repeat the question.
So I'm asking how your journey into the filmmaking thing, and mainly in terms of actually the practical issues that you dealt with while making your debut film, the kind of problems that you had to face, how you went about doing it, and how did it actually become a film, right?
Okay. Yeah. So how did I end up being a filmmaker? I think that goes way back into early 2000s when I started making short films, with the idea of being a filmmaker. And I think, we started, I was in a full-time IT job. I was a software engineer. So I used to make short films over weekends. And then the bug bit me, and I kind of started pursuing it a little more seriously. And that is when I realized that it's an extremely expensive art form. And like a painter can just paint on his own, a musician can do his own stuff. But so that kind of made me take a back step. I did not plunge into filmmaking full time, but I took a long break from filmmaking, and I was fortunate to find a producer who was a friend of mine, who is a big actor and also who is supporting a lot of newer, fresher voices. So kind of he reached out to me saying, he remembered me from my short film days. So 15 years later, or it's 18 years later, that I'm finally having my debut film here. So it's been a long journey. It's a dream I've lived for over close to 2 decades now. So yeah, I mean, that's where I started.
And I think this is one of the routes that actually we actually see a lot, that people who take up short film making. I mean, and again, another grouping that we have here is of trained, like academically trained or institutionally trained filmmakers and people who have self-taught. So that is another grouping that we have here. So many of the people who have not been to institutions of filmmaking often start off like this. And I think Fazil also has a similar story. Fazil might speak in Malayalam and I'll translate for him. And for Anaïs and Sophie, if we need translation, there's Pratik who will translate. Yeah.
താങ്ക് യു രതീഷ്. ആക്ച്വലി ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ഡിഗ്രി പഠന സമയത്ത് ഒരുപാട് ഫെസ്റ്റിവൽസും അതുപോലെ ഒരുപാട് സിനിമകളും കണ്ടിട്ടാണ് സിനിമ ചെയ്യാൻ തന്നെ പഠിച്ചത്. അതിൽ പ്രധാനമായിട്ടും ഞാൻ കോളേജുകൾ നടത്തുന്ന സ്പോർട്ട് കോമ്പറ്റീഷനിലെല്ലാം അറ്റൻഡ് ചെയ്യും. ഒരു ദിവസം കൊണ്ട് സിനിമ ഉണ്ടാക്കാം, 3 ദിവസം കൊണ്ട് സിനിമ ഉണ്ടാക്കാം. അപ്പോൾ വളരെ ചെറിയ സമയം കൊണ്ട് നമുക്ക് സിനിമ ചെയ്യാനുള്ള നമ്മുടെ ആവശ്യമായി മാറും അത്. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ അങ്ങനെ പഠിച്ചെടുക്കും. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു 3 വർഷത്തെ എക്സ്പീരിയൻസിന് ശേഷമാണ് ഞാൻ ആദ്യമായിട്ട് എൻ്റെ ഷോർട്ട് ഫിലിം ചെയ്യുന്നത്. പിന്നീട് ആണ് സിനിമ ചെയ്യാൻ 5 വർഷം എടുത്തു ആദ്യം സിനിമ ചെയ്യാൻ.
I'll translate this and let him continue. What you're saying is that while he's studying, he's trying to actually get into filmmaking and so on, studying college. And one of the things that he would do is to participate in these competitions that various colleges would make, what he calls spot filmmaking, like make a quick film and kind of do it. So which also he thinks gave him kind of a training in actually organizing his work and so on and so forth in a quick kind of fashion. Fazil, also about how did you find the producer? How did you? I mean, Fazil has made a short film before, 2 short films before, one of which I've seen. So how did you get to the feature film stage? Right?
എൻ്റെ ആദ്യ സിനിമ ആദ്യ ഷോർട്ട് ഫിലിം മധുര വഴിയാണ് എനിക്ക് പ്രൊഡ്യൂസർ കിട്ടിയത്, പ്രമോദ് ദിസ് ഇയർ. പുള്ളി IDSFKയിൽ നമ്മുടെ ഷോർട്ട് ഫിലിം കണ്ട് അങ്ങനെ നമ്മൾ അപ്രോച്ച് ചെയ്തതാണ്. അപ്പോൾ പാരലായിട്ട് ഞാൻ പല ആളുകളായിട്ട് ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്തു. പക്ഷേ ഒരു സ്റ്റാർ ഇല്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ നമുക്ക് പ്രൊഡക്ഷൻ കിട്ടാൻ വളരെ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടായിരുന്നു. അങ്ങനെ പുള്ളി ഞാനും കൂടി ചേർത്തിട്ടാണ് ഇത് ചെയ്തത്.
So again, another aspect that Fazil is touching upon is the significance of film festivals. If we first talked about the significance of these sport competitions, because his short film was shown in IDSFK, which is a major short film and documentary film festival in India, and the producer saw the film and approached him. So it's a happy chance. I mean, not many filmmakers do get such kind of happy kind of connections, but that's where Fazil actually comes from in filmmaking. Yeah, and we can come back to some of these things as we go along. Diwa, why don't you?
So I think the main challenge is to find funding and producers. And when you set out to make a film in India with no stars, with no known actor, and with no music, people don't understand it. People don't know how their money is going to be recovered. So I think that's what the main challenge is. As I was talking to Anaïs about it, how the lack of infrastructure or lack of public funding. So where do you go? So you need independent producers, maybe who've done a work like this before. And that's how I approached it. It was actually Instagram, because I hounded this person who had put up a post looking for content, and he was working at a company at the time, and then he backed off. And I was like, you have to listen to my script. Listen, please come once and listen to my script. And I literally had to beg him and plead him, and that's how all of it started. Yeah.
Again, I mean, we can actually see different kinds of ways in which people are navigating this problem. And one thing that's come up in earlier panels and discussions are also, especially talking about India, the kind of difficulty in finding kind of an organized production sector for independent cinema. I mean, you actually have to find random individuals who are interested in something that you're doing, pursue them one way or the other, and so on. This, I would think, is slightly different in Europe, I would imagine. I mean, who knows? I don't know. But as for imagination coming from a place like this. But Nina, if you could talk about, I know that your film was also a graduation project in your film school. So it'll be interesting to talk about a different kind of trajectory that you've had and finding the producer and stuff.
Yeah, so I don't know for the rest of Europe, but in Serbia too, it's very hard to find someone, especially when you're just up and coming, when it's your first feature, it's nearly impossible. So the way we did it, because I kind of knew that, and in the back of my head, I didn't want to not make my film. And so we decided to make it straight out of school. It was basically a school project. We found funding on the side, because it was still a bigger project than we would normally do in school. but we did it very in humble conditions and with people that I knew and that I went to school with. And then the actors came a little bit later, and we had some really, I would say, known actors that accepted to work in those conditions because they liked the story and because they were passionate about it, but at the same time they could afford it because they still worked on bigger projects.
So again, a different route again. Anaïs, what is your kind of trajectory to making your debut film?
So I began as an actress, but I didn't like this job because I was depending on other desire, not my own desire. So, but I didn't have any money to write and to make my own film. So I have to continue to work as an actress. But finally, I have a huge accident on the road during a shooting. A motorcycle hurt me really badly. And then I go to the hospital and I have indemnity. And so I was thinking to myself, if I have indemnity, I can write my own film. And it was my first short film, and then find a producer. And then in Europe, especially in France, we have the CNC. It's a public funding. And so I was thinking at the hospital when I was writing that I will be find the producer and then go to CNC, and everything happened as I planned it. So it was really great. And after I did 3 short movies, and then I was looking for a new producer for my feature film because I want a new producer. But there were coronavirus. So I have to wait 1 year because nobody wants to read my script because we were thinking it was the end of the world. So I have to wait. But after 1 year, a producer read my script and it was okay. And we go to the CNC and other stuff like that.
It's interesting when we start this conversation, especially about filmmaking, and how everybody made the film. We are talking to a set of people who've made the film, right? So there is a happy story there. That part of the story is not such a sad story, right? The difficulties start later. We'll come to that in a minute. But before that, I want to actually ask Kanu and then Sophie about their own trajectory. This is the second film that we are showing here, Agra. Both have gone to big festivals, both were at Cannes, if I'm right. Yeah.
Yes.
So Kanu, I mean, for you, you are again a trained filmmaker like Nina. You were studying SRFTI in Calcutta. So what was your trajectory of making the first film? And again, was the second film easy, difficult?
So the first film was back in 2014.
2014. So that is the answer.
it was very easy to do the second one. It was really, really easy. Trajectory into making the first film, meaning you're saying how did I eventually end up getting it produced? And yeah, so I went to film school and I graduated in 2007, and around the time I was in my final year, there was a very strong doc movement that was happening out of Calcutta, documentary movement, and I was very fiction oriented when I went to film school, but I discovered documentary at film school and I was completely taken aback. By a completely different form of filmmaking. I was like, wow, we can do this also. So I had started making my own docs by then. I was doing a doc for NHK, for ZDF Arte. I did a short. So I was sort of, in the process of making stuff. And by the time I was graduating, I was already finishing one of my docs. And sorry, I'm doing a long. I'll try to cut it as short as possible. But one of my professors at film school was meeting a famous Indian filmmaker called Dibakar Banerjee because he wanted to show his editing work. So I thought, fellow filmmaker, I'm editing, need feedback. So I slipped in one of my own doc discs, and that doc was being shot in Delhi, and Dibakar's next film was being shot in Delhi. So I just wanted to show him some of my work and get feedback, but he saw, and I shot it myself. So he saw and he said, you have a really good grip of the city, and I had grown up in Delhi. So he said, okay, I'm making a film, why don't you come? So that became, even while I was finishing my doc, it was an accident. I ended up working with him on Oi Lucky Lucky Oi, and our relationship just grew really quickly from there. And I ended up writing his next feature, also assisting him. So yeah, we grew really close. So I think after the second film, I sort of went off on my own, and I told Diwakar that I want to write something and I want to make something. So he said, okay, whenever you're ready, I'd like to have a look at what you're doing. And eventually, when I did end up finishing the screenplay for Titli, I went to him, and fortunately he really liked what he saw, and he said this film needs to get made. And that's where the balls sort of started rolling for Titli.
Right.
And yeah, for Agra, it was really difficult. We saw so Titli premiered at Cannes in 2014, and then 2015 October was the India release. So it took me a year and a half after Cannes to see through the film in India. I had to cut it again for India. So that was a long process. In 2016, I started writing Agra, and I already had a French producer who had distributed Titli in France, and that's how our relationship started. And he wanted to get into production, so he was involved really early on. We wrote a couple of drafts, and then we went to CNC. We got the CNC production fund, which was about 40% of the finance, but we still needed another 60% of the finance. And that took us 2.5 years to find someone who would be willing to make a film about sexual repression in India. We pretty much banged all the doors, but eventually we were really lucky to find Saregama from India, and they came on with the rest of the finance. So we ended up shooting the film in June and July of 2019, and then as we were in post, the pandemic hit, and then it took a while, as Anaïs was mentioning, everything, people thought it's the end of the end of the world. And yeah, so it took a while, but yeah, that was more or less the job.
So again, we can see that public funding, private funding, meeting filmmakers to CNC films here that way, supported by CNC. So you can actually see that there is some kind of trajectories emerging in this kind of story. The story becomes even more difficult when we talk about what do we do with a film that's made, right? I mean, what is distribution? But before I come to that, Sophie, you've been kind of a filmmaker for more than a decade now. You also perform. You're also actor in your latest film and so on.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you could now not just talk about your story, but also talk to these younger filmmakers in some fashion to actually say, how do you actually think about this process?
At the beginning, I've done a short movie without money, with a Super 8 camera. And I think I was lucky because I didn't want to do movies. And I made art school. And, and each time I had the opportunity to make another one. And I never wait to make movie. But I make movie who are not expensive. And maybe it's that's why I can always go at the end of the project, because I try to make a good adequation between what I have and what I do, and I feel free with that. But it's my type of cinema also that permits that. So I had the CNC for my last movie, so I was happy. But it's not expensive one. I've done one more expensive than the others, and with actors, known actors and all that. But I don't know if it's really my pleasure. I feel we are very lucky to do that.
So one more question before I move on. From your early days of filmmaking to now, have you followed a similar kind of a pattern in terms of seeking funding, production, and so on and so forth? Or have you tried out various kinds of production setups and financing setups and so on and so forth? So it's the same kind of...
No, each movie is a dispositif of financing, but writing, shooting, each time you have to think. I have to think the whole things and to be coherent. And sometimes I had a producer who called Emmanuel Chomet, who I made a lot of movies with him. This time I produced myself alone. The next one I'm gonna do co-production. Each project has to. I think it's very there is a link very straight between the movie and the production, and it's very important to think about that, not to put the money everywhere.
So, was there a reason for you to think that this particular film, the one that we're watching at the festival this time, you will produce as opposed to the other films? What was the reason for that choice?
Yes, I think I was very happy to do it by myself, just to do it by myself, because sometimes artists can be like infantilized, and and women especially. So I wanted to do it myself and say everybody have to trust me because I can produce the movie myself and not spend money everywhere and do it till the end, to the beginning till the end, without somebody who tell me what to do. And I think, and I was happy too to have 100% of my movie. But it is also a métier, a profession. So I have to admit that there is things like strategy or political films I'm not very fond of. So it's better to have a co-producer.
So, while making Voyages Italy, do you think that compared to your experience with other producers, was it easier for you, difficult for you, in a very practical sense?
In the fabrication, it was nearly the same because I make like artisanal.
Artisanal, yeah. Artisanal.
Yeah. So even when I had a producer, I was making a lot of things myself. So it was nearly the same for the fabrication. The problem is more festival, sellers,
Yeah,
all that.
That's what I'll come to next.
Yes.
So that's precisely what I want to go to actually next. I mean, making a film is one thing. I mean, what you do with a made film is the next significant question. So, and many of the times when you're making a film, we might not be really thinking about that when we are actually starting off the making, because it's a passion project. You want to make a film, but the reality hits once the film is made. So again, we'll start with the same order, Sumanth. I mean, what were your thoughts about what you do with your film? I mean, did you have a plan, or did it just happenstance, accidents, things worked out, not worked out? How was it? I hope you say worked out because we are here, but
how I wish. Yeah, but being a first-time filmmaker, I think we have the advantage, if I can call it that, of not being too bothered about the eventual commerce of the film. At least we'd like to believe it is that. It started out like that. I know, like I mentioned, I was very, very fortunate to already have a producer on board, trusting me completely with the initial, just the one-line idea that I had. He said, go ahead, make the film. But, I have always had this aversion towards, why would somebody put in so much money into a film that I want to make? That's my personal form of expression. That's a story that I want to tell. And, but then, yeah, when you have a producer trusting you completely and saying, go ahead, we jumped into it. But also, around the same time, there is this new wave of independent cinema coming through in my language, Kannada. Okay, there's a fantastic film called Pedro that came out a couple of years back. And then there is a film, Shivamma, that again traveled to festivals and won festivals abroad. Which is showing this time in competition. But the reality being, they are also struggling to find a platform. Neither the theatrical release nor the OTTs is happening. So that somewhere is playing around in my head, even when I'm making the film. So constantly, when I'm making the film also, I'm questioning myself, saying, okay, where is this film going to go other than festivals? Because being a filmmaker, all that you want is to have an audience watch your film. No, I mean, commerce is still secondary, but the primary reason why you're making a film is you're telling a story and you want people to react to that story, and you're more than anything, you want the audience to watch the film and you want to see how they react to the film. So the biggest question mark being, where do you find your audience? Other than the festival, festivals is still a very small pocket of audience. So where do you find the larger audience? And where, like say if Kanu is struggling to have his film get a theatrical release, extended theatrical release or OTT, then you can imagine how hard it is for the regional films. So yeah, it's a little worrying signs for me, especially because first of all, the language barrier that we have. We are a very, very small market, and theatrical release for independent films is kind of ruled out completely. The OTTs have more or less shut doors. So that is a concern, and at some point in this journey of making films, and I hope to crack it. I don't know if we have an answer for that right away, but yeah, that's a challenge that I think we will have to work with.
You might not have an answer, but have you thought of some kind of strategy which you can share?
How? I would love to. I'd love to hear the other filmmakers and kind of pick something up from them. So you have to poke them a little more, because I don't have an answer. I'm looking for an answer here.
So Fazil, what are your plans after making the film? What did you think will happen?
പ്രധാനമായിട്ടും ആളുകൾ സിനിമ കാണണം തന്നെയാണ് നമ്മൾ മേക്ക് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നത്. അത് ഫെസ്റ്റിവൽ വഴിയാണെങ്കിലും OTT വഴിയാണെങ്കിലും തിയേറ്റർ വഴിയാണെങ്കിലും അതിൽ എങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ എത്തിക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ അത്രയും നമ്മൾ പരിശ്രമിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. പ്രധാനമായിട്ട് ആളുകൾ കാണണം, അതാണ് ആഗ്രഹം.
He's saying that, I mean, like others also, his desire is that people should watch the film, and he's still struggling with whatever. But have you thought of any ways of cracking this? I mean, it might not work, or I mean, might or might not work. But have you thought of any ways of cracking this situation? Because the problems are kind of well known at this point of time. Many filmmakers have talked about this problem of how distribution, OTT, these are not really solving the crisis. But we also have to start thinking about some strategies of actually working out. It might not really work, but how do we actually enter this world, right? So any thoughts on this? Because like Sumanth said, it will be helpful for everyone if somebody has some thoughts on the matter, right?
ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ ബഡ്ജറ്റിലുള്ളൊരു സിനിമ ആളുകൾ കാണുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നമ്മൾ അത് ഫെസ്റ്റിവലിൽ വർക്കാവുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ആളുകൾ നോട്ട് ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ പിന്നെ നമുക്ക് OTT ആ രീതിയിൽ മുമ്പോട്ട് പോകാൻ പറ്റും. അതാണ് എൻ്റെ പ്ലാൻ. ഐ മീൻ ആളുകൾ അത് ഇപ്പോൾ ഇന്ത്യയിലാണെങ്കിൽ തന്നെ നമ്മളെ ഈ മാമി ആണെങ്കിലും IFFK ആണെങ്കിലും IFFI ആണെങ്കിലും അവിടെയുള്ള ഫെസ്റ്റിവൽ സിനിമകൾ നമ്മൾ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കും. ആളുടെ അഭിപ്രായം നമ്മൾ പല വഴി കേൾക്കാറുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ നമ്മൾ ഒരുപാട് സിനിമകൾ OTTയിൽ കാണാറുമുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു വഴിയാണ് ഞാൻ.
Like I said, of the various people sitting here, Sumanth, Fazil and Diwa are having their world premiere here. So not yours. Sorry, yours is a South Asia premiere. Sorry, San Sebastian. I forgot from mistake. So, but what Fazil is saying is also how much investment he's putting in the film festival as a site which gives visibility to the films, which then hopefully will translate into some kind of a distribution strategy. Diwa, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so when I was making the film, I wanted to send it out to festivals. What I didn't know was that the whole festival journey is going to be so challenging and so confusing. So for me, I think Film Bazaar was the first time when I got an idea of what it was going to be like. And then still I didn't know how to navigate through, because there are so many festivals you haven't heard of. You don't know what to do about it. People talk about festivals, but what does really happen? What are you looking for when you go to a festival? Or why do you want to do a run? And I think that was the challenging part, but still you submit, you socialize with people. Film Bazaar helped a lot. But then it requires a lot of patience. You're constantly confused when you get rejections, and you're getting back-to-back rejections. So, your self-esteem goes away. You don't know what to do next. You made it, and you wanted to be screened at least in one of the festivals. I think what I did was I talked to fellow filmmakers. Like I talked to Pratik Watts, who was very encouraging, who told me who would help me navigate, or Deepthi Dukuna. Like I would talk to people and ask them, like, look, I don't know, I'm so confused. I don't even know where to send it. Like, how does it happen? And I think that helped because when I was like sending it to San Sebastian, I wasn't really happy. I was a little like, oh, I don't know, like, how it's going to be. But then it was great. Like, we were the first Indian film to win the New Directors Award, and it was so welcoming the way they received us. It's a very small town, and the festival is great. So yeah, so I think those were my small learnings, Film Bazaar or the fellow filmmakers who've had that journey, just going up to them, just reaching out to them, and they help you a lot. Yeah, I think that's what
Have
helped
you
me.
thought of from here on what the career of the film?
No, I think at every point then you become clueless because you think you've got this figured out, and then there are new sets of challenges, and it's very uncertain. I personally think.
And again, I mean, I realized that when I earlier said that it would be different in India and Europe, I shouldn't be a kind of painting Europe in one brush. Clearly, there's a whole difference within what happens in Europe. So, Nina, I'm sure the challenges you faced would be very different from both from Indian filmmakers and from the French filmmakers. Clearly, so what were your plans for the film, and how did it work out?
Yes, so because we didn't know anything about the industry when we started because we were still in school, it was somewhere at the end of post-production that we really started thinking about it. And we kind of asked around, but in Serbia, I don't want to say no one, but very few people know how the festival circuit works. Like, there are a couple, but then they've probably had a premiere at Cannes or Venice or somewhere big, and then it kind of goes from there. And our film was too small for those festivals, but still, we wanted to try and make, I guess, as big of an impact as we could, kind of to get our names out there and to do as much as we can with what we have. So at some point, as I was researching the topic, because like I said, we didn't know anything, I found a sales rep in the US who actually deals exclusively with indie films. And it turns out that he dealt with foreign films as well. And he kind of...
It will be useful to mention
Sorry?
the name. It will be useful to mention the name so that others know.
His name is Glenn Reynolds, and he's worked in distribution for a very long time. But now he works I think he works alone now. But he has the connections and he knows the ropes, he knows the way it works. So he kind of guided us through which festivals to apply to in the US because we were looking for a US premiere. I kind of figured that if it premiered there, somewhere where you know the name, then in Serbia it would be kind of easier. And it turned out that it was. And then afterwards, so after we premiered at Slamdance in January. He went on to look for US distributors for us and connect us with them. And in Serbia, one of our professors recommended that we get a PR as soon as possible and get the news out there. So I would recommend, you guys probably have them, but if you don't, try to get them. So we had a meeting with a distributor in Serbia in February, right after the festival, and he liked the film. It was so we were talking about a theatrical release. And he liked the film, he liked it very much, but he honestly said that he didn't know what to do with the film, that he didn't know how it would attract an audience, and to see... Basically, he told us to come back when we have more festivals and more awards, and we were lucky enough that that happened for us, so now we're getting a theatrical release in like a week. We're starting in Serbia. And we ended up signing with a US distributor, but we're going, I think, straight to VOD and maybe then some platforms. I don't know. Hopefully by the end of the year.
So, I mean, one of the things would be for all of you to also kind of look at these patterns and see how one can learn from each other and so on and so forth. I would like to move to Anaïs now. And I'll actually come to Kanu first because I want to ask a question to both of you together after that. I'll come back. Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah. So, Kanu, your kind of distribution strategies of film from when you made Agra to now, from when you made Italy to now, how has it changed? How has it evolved? What can you actually tell these young filmmakers about this kind of strategy?
So with Italy, I was really lucky because Italy was financed by one of the biggest studios in the country. It was Yashraj Films. So I didn't have a distribution battle. They did make me do another cut of the film because they thought it was too dark, what the can cut was. So all I had to do was do another cut of the film, which I said, okay, if you feel the film needs to be in a different form for India, shape for India, let me do it myself. So I did that. But the limited theatrical run that we got was always sort of on the cards. And then the only reason it got onto a bigger OTT platform was because it got bundled with the studio's bigger films. Otherwise, I think it could have been harder for a film like Titli to find a home. But it was because of that heft that it went. So I think one of the ideas for smaller films that can be played out is to find a bigger backer who has a broader bundle, and sometimes smaller films get bundled in with bigger films. So that's one way to do it. Yeah, and Agra, yeah, I mean, we don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens with it. But I mean, the problem that you mentioned, I've been thinking about it quite for quite a while, and the idea that sort of I've been forming in my head is not a new idea. It's just a slightly different take on an older idea. People have done it before this, but I feel like if distribution is the problem, then we have to attack distribution in a way where today I think there is a very pressing need for an OTT platform that is dedicated to independent cinema. Because the bigger OTT platforms have sort of moved on. The story has moved on for them. The initial phase where they were getting their subscriptions from the bigger A-tier metro cities, where their perception of the audience is that it's a much more intelligent, intellectual audience. That time for them has passed now. They've moved on. They want the subscriptions from the B centers, C centers. And again, their perception is that the audiences there want dumbed down Bollywood kind of content. So that doesn't take away from the fact that we have a really deep rooted film culture, and we have a tradition of telling some really, really important and significant stories, and that is not going to get eroded very quickly. I mean, we have a set of voices here. We have at least 100 films playing in the festival, if not more than that. So I'm saying the supply is there, and the supply is there. I mean, if you look at the audiences that are watching, stepping in to watch these films, you can see that the demand is also there.
There are a few things I would ask maybe after I open up, because there are interesting connections even in the kind of thematics and so on and so forth between films that have come from very different kind of contexts, which I'll come to in a minute. But before that, I would like to open it up to ask if there's any questions from the audience. Yeah.
Very good. Very good afternoon to everybody. My question is to open to everybody, but specific to Kanu, Sumanth, and Fazil. Now, what are the chances for independent filmmakers in getting into state film awards or national film awards and state subsidies accessing, or some film policy like in Karnataka and Kerala we have got state film awards also and subsidy also, if I'm right. So what are the chances for independent? Any struggle or any feedback I want. Thank you.
So all the four, Diwa, all of you can answer this question, four of you. The question is about state support basically in terms of awards or subsidies and so on. And what are the difficulties in India? So clearly there is a public finance thing that we talk about in France. I mean, not so much for Nina as I understand. So what is your story also would be interesting. Is there a history of state funding of cinema there that you could access? So I will maybe start with, maybe I'll start with Nina first and then we can come back. We can hear from all contexts, that'll be useful, yeah?
So how we fund films in Serbia? Okay,
especially state
funding.
States funding.
Well,
We have got here in India, even central government, whatever union government, they also annually give film awards across all the languages or all the states.
Okay.
Some particular states also, they will, for the benefit of filmmakers, they will call for annual state film awards, which also have some cash prize and for some subsidy also. Yeah, those kind. Not before making, I'm not saying in pre-production. After finish, like festival circuit, even for awards, the makers will submit their films,
Okay.
and there will be a jury of panel. If their films get selected in 1, 2 or whatever the various category, they are entitled for some prize money also, cash. Those kind, I am saying. For independent.
So after?
So he's making a distinction between state support for production
Okay.
and state support after. So you can talk about both. State support after in terms of, in the case of India, there's mostly awards or subsidies and so on and so forth. So both, you could talk about both. Both are important.
So films in Serbia are mostly state funded. We have a national film center, and I think a couple times a year they open it up and you can submit your script for different categories. But the truth is that the money that they're awarding there is not enough for a film. So most people turn to Europe and to co-productions with France or with Luxembourg, Italy, wherever they have partners. And then that takes time because you have to then go to France and ask them for funding and wait for the cycle to finish, and then you see where you are and how much you're missing. That's a very long process, and not many films actually get made because it's so complicated. We went around it. We did get a little bit of state funding, like the sixth of our budget was state funded, but that was for a student film.
A sixth of the funding.
Yeah, but that was for a student film. And as students of the university, we have the right to apply with our final thesis project for some money, but because it was supposed to be a short, well, most students make shorts anyway, and then they kind of give money accordingly. So we had to go around it, and we found funding. We actually pre-sold our TV rights so we can fund the movie, and that's how we shot it.
And the TV is also state TV?
Yeah. But they don't. That was the 1 year that my producer, I wish he was here to tell you the story. He tells it far better than I can. But he approached them and he kind of hustled them into kind of buying them for a little more than they probably would have now. So yeah. Anyway, and as far as afterwards, some festivals that we attended do give out cash awards, cash prizes, but I think it's difficult to navigate those because I'm not sure how it is at, for example, San Sebastian. But sometimes the name of the festival is far more valuable than maybe 1,000 or 4,000 or how much money they're giving. And also all the money that we really made this year kind of went back into some part of the work that we're doing with the film. So whether it's traveling, maybe a festival covers for me, but not for someone else, or a marketing or the PR that we're paying for. So it kind of, we're on a zero level for now.
In India too, there used to be a system of state television buying films, but that's, I think, dried up last some years. So that's not there anymore. So Diwa, from onwards, you can actually talk about the Indian.
Yeah, so for subsidy in my state, we have to have one theatrical release and we have to censor the film. That we haven't done yet, and we would want a theatrical release for that. So yeah, so that is.
So that's kind of a cycle.
And it's very difficult in my state because
to get the subsidies, money for theatrical.
So I at least have to screen it at one theater and get the film censored for that to happen to get the subsidy, and then. From where I come from, it's very difficult, like the Kumaoni region and the Garhwal region. I'm a Kumaoni. There is no channel as such, and and the region is very small, so it's relatively much harder.
In this context, Fazil will speak next. His film is in competition in the Kerala Film Festival, so that's one, which is a state-run, government-run film festival, so that's there. So Fazil.
പുള്ളി ചോദിച്ചത് സിനിമ ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് മുമ്പേ എങ്ങനെ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ളതാണോ? ഓക്കെ. അത് ഇതുപോലെ IFFK ഒക്കെ നമുക്ക് സെൻസർ വേണ്ട. നമ്മൾ മാമിയിൽ അയച്ച പോലെ തന്നെ ഡയറക്റ്റ് അവർക്ക് അയക്കുകയാണ് ചെയ്തത്. നമുക്ക് കേരള സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ഫിലിം അവാർഡ്സിന് അയക്കണമെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് സെൻസർ ചെയ്യണം. അപ്പോൾ അത് എല്ലാ വർഷവും കേരളത്തിൽ സ്റ്റേറ്റ് അവാർഡ് നടക്കാറുണ്ട്. അതിന് അത്യാവശ്യം ഒരു വാല്യൂ ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ ആളുകൾ, പക്ഷെ വലിയൊരു ഭീമമായിട്ടുള്ള തുകയല്ല, പക്ഷെ എന്നാൽ കൂടി അത്യാവശ്യം ചെറിയൊരു തുകയാണ്. അതുപോലെ IFFKയിലും പ്രൈസുകളുണ്ട്.
So mostly for him, it's basically awards that are the things that he can hope for. One is the Kerala State Award, which is done annually and so on. National Award also, I'm assuming, is open for you. But also the film festival that the Kerala government runs, which actually has, his film is in the international competition, so that's a big chance. There's also awards for Malayalam cinema within that, so those are all possibilities for him. Sumanth.
Yeah, so to answer your question, this being my first film, I'm yet to get to that point where I can speak with authority of what's the actual scene there. But definitely we are hopeful, because that's one thing that we are because we have made the film in such a tight shoestring budget that the subsidy and the state award collectively can kind of help us sail through. Okay, so that's the that's the only comfort that we have as of now. But we're not looking at that. But that definitely is kind of going to cover majority of our costs, because we managed to make the film in such a shoestring budget. So, but yeah, I don't know if I've completely answered your question, because once I completely finish the process of taking the film and through the end, maybe I can speak with authority of how does subsidy work, and can we have that as a consideration even before starting the film and all that. But within my knowledge, given that it's a Kannada film with the child protagonist, and maybe once we get the censor done as a children's film or something, the chances of subsidy and the chances whatever we have in the state awards is kind of making going to make us get us back some money that we've put into the film.
So one of the things that's emerging, I'll come to Kanu in a bit. One of the things that's emerging is also the need for censoring the film or getting the certificate, which will make them eligible for state funding. So there's again a process that you have to go through. That's there. So that's another step in the process. Yeah. Kanu, I mean, how do you think about, because you also work closer with the industry more than many of these people, right? So what is your relationship with state support and things like that? How do you see it?
My first thought is state support ? But anyway, yeah. So I make films in Hindi, so there's no question of talking about the state support. The only available state awards are the national awards, and my take on that would be, as long as the state itself doesn't get involved in the awards, each award is great for the filmmaker. The national awards have been a great platform for filmmakers to be able to have their film recognized and get a lot of added value if it does get that sort of an award, as long as the state chooses to stay out of it, which connects itself with our larger censorship issue. My take on censorship is that there should be censorship should not be cut based. No filmmaker should be asked to alter their film. It should be guidance based. You take your film, this is my film, and you just give me a rating. Give me an R rating like there is in the US. If you think it's a selected adult kind of film, then it should be a ratings based system. You just rate my film. I don't think the state should interfere and ask any filmmaker to be changing their film for an audience, because I think that is equivalent to the state feeling like the state infantilizing its audience. None of us are kids. You're not a child. I'm not a child. No, none of us are kids. We don't need to be told what we can see or we cannot. We just need to be guided in the right direction. So this whole thing of you need to censor your film to be able to go to the national awards, I don't understand that, first of all. So yeah, I mean, that's my take on the awards scenario that we have in India right now. What was the second?
Subsidies and stuff.
Yeah, so subsidies. I mean, there are subsidies. There are subsidies that are followed through. One has heard many cases in India. There's the UP subsidy, which is pretty robust, and you do end up getting it. But again, I mean, I feel like the subsidy system needs a few tweaks. Anyway, independent filmmakers, given the current scenario we are in, if you're asked to go back and facilitate a theatrical for your film to be able to access that subsidy, I don't understand that system. I don't see, where that's going to go, and the basic philosophy of subsidizing film in your state comes from the fact that you're looking at pushing a certain kind of film, because the other kind of film doesn't really need the subsidy, right? So yeah, to me, there's a slight mismatch within this philosophy. Yeah.
Kanu's talking about the UP because the film is set in Agra. So it's called, so that's obvious, I think. I would want to turn
So
to...
just one last thing, for me to be able to access the UP subsidy, the film it's not enough for the film to be set there. Yeah. The filmmaker has to be from that state.
Okay.
So so I'm not getting that
Producer
subsidy.
also,
Yeah.
anyone, no?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Either director or producer, any has to be the state origin, if I'm right.
Possible, yeah.
And I will ask Anaïs and Sophie also about this. The imagination that in the world of filmmaking, especially coming from India and other places, is that Europe, continental Europe, especially France, there is enough safe state support. You're all having a good time getting money, and this is the imagination that's there. But clearly, there'll be a history. There'll be changes that's happening because policies everywhere are being kind of changed, and there is changes from earlier systems and so on that will be happening in France too. So, what is the condition in France today when you think about state support, both in terms of production and in terms of distribution or awards and all kinds of anything that will help you get your money back, so to speak?
But yes, yes, with the price. But from my part, it was special because I made 2 movies with the price, but it's very cheap movie, like Les Coquillettes. It was 30,000 euros for the shooting,
30,000.
and it was financed with a price with another movie. I had a price, and so I can put it in the shooting. After, for all the post-production, it was more expensive because it was all post-synchronized. But and another price I put, I had a pellicule. It was a long time ago, like pellicule, Kodak.
Kodak.
It was Kodak.
Film, Kodak film.
Yes. But
Quelle est la condition actuelle de soutien étatique de la part du gouvernement concernant la production, post-production ou distribution? Est-ce que le gouvernement, est-ce qu'il y a de financement public?
oui, le CNC.
So,
Ouais.
and Anaïs already mentioned public television as
Yes.
one possibility.
Yes.
Yes, and
And when you go to see a movie in France, you go to the movie, there is a little part of the ticket, even if it's an American movie, there is a little part of the ticket who go in a box, and the box is to finance independent cinema.
yes,
It's
it's CNC.
CNC.
That's,
So
that's
that's
how
the CNC money.
It's not government money. It's independent. CNC is independent.
Yes.
It's not from the
and
government.
les régions aussi.
Yes, on all the region. Like,
Yeah.
you know, in France, it's really important. There are huge difference between region, and each region can give you can give to the film money. But everything is not like, we are not like a rich director making film really like no, absolutely not. In my case, I have to say no to all my. I didn't been paid since 2 years for making my film, so it's not like it's not so easy. You because also all the salaries, les salaries. Yes, all the salaries are really high in France, you know. So lots of the money is going for the technician and all that kind of stuff. So we're not so à l'aise. Je sais pas comment on dit.
So,
We are not so comfortable.
Kanu wants to ask a
Yeah.
question about.
So I also, because I got the CNC funding a few years back, but now recently we've also been hearing about the potential revamp of the public funding for cinema and how the CNC funding might be potentially reduced. I was reading a piece just last week in The Guardian, which was speaking about the newer conversation that is rising around public money support for cinema in France. So could you tell us a little bit more about that, about what's happening with that?
I noticed, but well, yes, there is a changement because I'm not a specialist of that, but I think they want to open the CNC for movies who make more money, but it's not the goal, in fact. Well,
So
So that conversation has already started. It's
yes, they change the type of commission and the people inside, and so they it's true. And so they look if the movie is going to work or not. So if he works, he doesn't need the CNC. So the end of something.
Anaïs, you were saying something?
no.
Okay. Any other question? from the audience? Yeah.
So, like, my question is open to everybody. Like, my question is that what is the importance of a sound engineer in making films?
Sound engineer. Yeah. Who wants to take it?
Are you separating the designer from the engineer? What do you mean when you say sound engineer?
Like,
Recordist, designer. So
yeah, sound designer or like sync sound. Like, these are the two. Like, what
So-
is the connection
so you-
between them?
yeah, so significance of
Significance, yeah.
sound design, basically. I mean, that's what he's asking. Who wants to take it? I mean, some of your films have great sound design, so
I mean, there would be no film without the sound designer. Probably the most important and underrated and unrecognized member of film crew. One of the most underrated, definitely for sure. Yeah, I mean, mm, sound. I feel for any film is what sets the tone really for what you're ingesting through your ear, because the eyes can also I mean, this is my personal opinion, I feel like you can seduce much easier through your eyes, but it's much harder to do that with your ears. The ears just filter the truth much more. So in that sense, what you're hearing on the soundtrack of your film, I feel like becomes or has the potential to be much more honest by the dint of its very texture of what it does to your ear. It is a much more honest connection that an audience makes with your film most of the times without them even knowing. So the sound design is, has that connection with the audience. So yeah, I feel like it's invaluable to have great sound design for your film.
any other questions? So I just want to flag one thing, and then probably we can close the session. Is something I noticed. I mean, initially when I was told that I'll be doing a panel with all of you, I was like, okay, how does this set of filmmakers come together? I mean, what's the way in which I can connect them together? And then as I thought about your films, something's very interesting kind of emerged. One of the things I thought, for example, in Kanu's film, Sumanth's film, Diwa's film, and Nina's film, is the sharp relationship with place, with the location, with the place, with some kind of an intense relationship with the kind of spaces that the characters occupy, and the way the space becomes very central to the story itself in a certain manner, which I thought was very interesting, again, cutting across places. Again, I thought that Fazil's and Nina's film has very interesting, strong women protagonists, and the story is told through them, their narrative in a particular way. And strangely, following slightly kind of a caricature of France maybe in our heads, both your films deal with art in interesting ways. Sophie's film actually is referencing Rossellini and that tradition of filmmaking in a certain manner, taking on that history. And for you, art making is very central in your film, in a nice film. So it was very interesting to actually see. I'm just saying this. There's no question here. I was just thinking that there's very interesting ways in which kind of films talk to each other, even when like you are actually randomly put together, so to speak, right? I mean, then you realize that there are concerns which are much more larger, which are talking to each other, which actually connects these films, and which I think is fantastic. And the film festivals are a space where you actually discover such strange coincidences and strange connections. Anyway, if there's no more questions from the audience, thanks a lot. This was a very interesting conversation. I hope future filmmakers and others would find this useful. Thanks again. Thanks a lot, and good luck with your films and the future of your films and your future films. Yeah, thank you.